changing to such an extent that the old understanding of Jesus as a savior and of believing in the miracles of the Bible and so forth, if that's the way Christianity continues, it's going to be cast aside and it's going to disappear. And he said it's got to change if it's going to survive. So what it's going to look like in 30 years, I don't know. But it's certainly losing out among the population right now. A few years ago, there was a Christian leader who came to Fayetteville to speak at one of the large auditoriums at the University Ballroom. And he wrote a book about how to answer the new atheism, right? Mm-hmm. How to respond to the new atheists and so forth. And he came there, and everybody was all... there's Albert Mohler. Okay, he was a dean of a theological college and so forth. And people were very jazzed up. All the fundamentalist Christians especially were there to see how are we going to respond to these atheists. And this guy got up in front of this auditorium chock full of people and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we're over. We're done. We lost. Christianity is going to shrink, and there's nothing we can do about it." And he proceeded to give a lecture to support his points. And gosh, this was a lecture I would have been proud to give. This guy he was a Christian, but he was basically saying all the kind of things I usually say about religious movements and society in the U.S. with regard to religion. And he was saying, look, this is just shrinking. Mm-hmm. And so... You know what? I haven't, speaking of debates, I haven't been able to get a debate going for a while. I've been looking for debate opponents and so forth. It used to be easy. It used to be very common for people to have debates against atheists. But that's becoming less and less available. And I think part of the reason is people saw that it was counterproductive in the religious world because... Gosh, the atheists were winning so often, and
definitely true.
One of the things that debates do, by the way, is, and I think really the main reason I started doing debates was I wanted people to see that those who are atheists, those who are non-believers, are not scary people. We aren't monsters. We aren't, showing up with horns on our heads and things like that. We're just regular people. We're your neighbors. If we have this many millions and millions of atheists in the United States, and most people don't even know it, then that suggests that we're fairly innocuous. We mm-hmm. aren't dangerous. We're not crazy. We're not extremists of any sort.
Right. Well, one thing I wanted to touch on real quick, and it's an argument that I hear from. I actually had to catch a liberal Christian on it too, and it's this idea of salvation. A lot of the Abrahamic faiths in particular, Christianity and Islam in particular, stake a lot of this idea that people need to be saved from something. It seems like that their idea is that their idea of humanity is that left to our own devices, and it goes into that morality argument too, that we're just these horrible, basal, awful things that are not worth scraping off of your boot, and that it's only because of God or because of salvation through Jesus from faith that you have any worth, that you're able to, how can I say it, that you're able to overcome that basal humanity. How would you answer that kind of an argument?
Well, I think there's by the way, first of all, Bishop Spong also thinks that that's a very bad understanding of Christianity, and he had a presentation called Jesus as Savior, a concept that's got to go. Right? To which I say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, because what that basically sets up religion as, it's going to tell you that you've got a problem, and then it's going to tell you that it's got the solution. But if you don't buy the problem, then you don't need to buy the solution. So they're really going to sell you the problem. Mm-hmm. Okay, and the problem is you're a worthless worm that deserves to go to hell. Okay, and what's that going to do to your self-esteem? If you say, you know what, I was born deserving hell, deserving more torture than any human being could ever dish out. If I'm so horrible, then apparently the world was made worse by my birth. Okay. Mm-hmm. Every time a baby is born, people should shake their heads and say, oh, there goes the world. It's worse now. Okay, because we have another vile being in it. Well, that's a terrible way to look at people. And I think that part of the reason that that Freud, okay, don't agree a whole lot with Freud, but one of the things he said that I think was spot on was that religion is in many ways a very unhealthy way to look at people and an unhealthy way to look at the world. Because if you start looking at people as problems and that they aren't deserving and that they aren't at heart good and that they're evil and they want to get you, and if it weren't for people forcing the human beings to act decently, they would be at each other's throats and the world would be sort of like as described in the Mad Max films, where everyone is just it's every man and woman for themselves and so forth. That just encourages people to act at their worst. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I think part of the reason that religion has sold that notion is so they can sell you the product that is the solution, which is their own views. And yeah, there's nothing to that, by the way, in terms of psychology. You can bring up kids to be perfectly healthy and kind and decent without incorporating religion and religious views. In fact, I just saw an article just a couple of months ago about how when they conducted tests and looked at how children treat each other and so forth, the ones that were non-religious tended to treat their peers better than the ones that were religious. Mm-hmm. And I think part of the reason for that might be, I'm not a psychologist, but I would suspect part of it is that you don't have to compartmentalize the world and people when you look at, here's my religion, you have yours, we're different, and so forth. Mm-hmm. Religion tends to, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, bring out differences. And I would rather have people bring out the things that we have in common. Because you know what? You go around the world and you talk to people, and I've traveled a little bit of the world in other countries and lived in South America and so forth. People all kind of want the same things. We have a lot in common. Mm-hmm. We want to have families. We want love. We want gainful employment. We want to feel good about ourselves and so forth. And as soon as people introduce the notion that, you want to do all that, but you don't deserve it, okay, that's very abusive to one mentally. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's and another thing that I point out, or that I pointed out to one person in particular, was that it not only shades your opinion of yourself, but it shades your opinion of everybody else. I mean, you start to see, well, if you're not Christian or you're not Muslim, then you are still worthless because you don't have that morality, and especially with atheists. And I think that that's a big reason why even now, even though the nuns, as you said, are becoming the fastest growing group in America, we're still seen as the immoral baby eaters that we want nothing more than to just debauchery.
Right. There's a whole lot of stereotypes about atheists, and that, in fact, that's one of the things I address in my book, What is Atheism? A Short Introduction, available wherever fine books are sold. And, one of the things I address is people have warped views about non-believers, and they think that we're just, horrible people. As I mentioned, one of the good things about debates is I get to show that we can be rational and that we have reasons for why we believe the things that we believe. It's not just that we're emotional or, flying off the handle or whatever. By the way, on one occasion when I was about to do a debate at the University of Arkansas, there was a friend of mine that was standing at the entrance to the auditorium where I was going to be, and someone walked in and said, "Where's the atheist?" And my friend pointed at me and said, "Oh, there he is over there." And the guy glared at me and said, "So that's the atheist." As if somehow it's like, just looking at me, you could tell I was evil or, something like that. Well, no, we're actually very decent people. And you know what? You probably know this, having researched atheism and so forth so much, but the atheists are underrepresented in prisons in the United States, mm-hmm. where, a fairly sizable percentage of the population. But you look at the prison population, and you find actually atheists are only 2 or 3% of the prison population, but they're a far larger percent in the general population, suggesting that either atheists are really good at getting away with crime, or which is unlikely, or you know what, we're maybe more moral than
well,
a
we
lot
do
of
tend to be
religious
smarter
believers.
too, though. So there could be some.
Yeah, people that have an education are more likely to not engage in crime unless it's white collar. But yeah, we're at least underrepresented in prison, which means we're pretty moral. We're good people.
Now, you said you've been debating for a while. Who are some of the apologists that you've debated over the years? What are a couple? If they wanted to try to look you up, maybe on YouTube to catch a debate or two.
Yeah, I think a few of my debates are online. I've debated. I mentioned one of my former office mates, Steve Cowan, debated him several times. A couple of times here in Fayetteville, and then also in Alabama. I debated a presuppositionalist, Michael Butler, in Maryland, way back in 2001. I debated Ted Cable, who was at that time dean of the Fuller Theological Seminary. That one was kind of interesting. He couldn't get over my long hair. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, some of us, we're not, as follically gifted, I'll say.
Yeah, that's right. And I debated a fellow named Peter Payne in Ohio State. He drove all the way from Ann Arbor, Michigan that night. It was cold and snowy. Oh, wow. And I just love doing debates. We had a huge auditorium, and despite the snowstorm, we had a very, very good turnout. That was very interesting. Richard Howell, who also got his PhD here at the University of Arkansas, I debated him a couple of times. So, I've traveled all over the country. Not on the West Coast, though. I'd like to debate someone on the West Coast.
So who's on your bucket list? Who are the guys that you would just love to have a debate? If you were only able to do one more, who are maybe two or three people that you would want to hit up the most?
Well, offhand, I can just think of one. There's a fellow named William Lane Craig,
yes,
who has famously gone around doing all kinds of debates around the country. And there have been several organizations, one in Boston, one in Knoxville, Tennessee, and one in, where was it? I think it was in Illinois, that tried to organize a debate between us. But you know what? When he found out I was the opponent, he bowed out of the debates all three times. He just wouldn't do it. And his excuse at that time was, well, I only debate people with PhDs. At that time, I didn't have my PhD.
I've heard that one.
But you know what? After the third time, he said, I'm not going to debate him because he doesn't have his PhD yet. Well, he debated someone who only had a high school diploma. Okay, who had no college degrees whatsoever. So that excuse was kind of out the window.
Well, he also debated Hitchens, too, who didn't have a PhD.
Yeah, there we go. Also, yeah, exactly. So, I guess I'd like to debate that guy. But I think two of the people that I've debated know him, and I think he knows that I'm a very strong debater. Maybe I think that's the reason he doesn't want to debate me.
Okay, so anybody out there that maybe has some connections, William Lane Craig, we're anytime, any place, he's ready for you.
Come on, Craig. I'm ready.
Now, what about Lee Strobel? I know he's another quasi-famous apologist. Would you like to maybe destroy him?
Oh, the Case for Christ guy?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun. Because I have his Case for Christ book, and I didn't think he made much of a case.
Yeah. I know Price kind of chewed him up and spit him out in the book, too. That was yes. a pretty good one.
Yeah. So, but again, I have a hard time getting people to debate these days.
Yeah, it's kind of, unless it seems like, I think I may know a line on one person that might be willing to debate you. He's kind of an up-and-comer. His name is Blake Gunta, and he runs a website called BeliefNet, or BeliefMap. He might be willing to. He's kind of a young gun. He's debated Matt Dillahunty a couple of times. He's really trying to get his career as an apologist going, so he might be willing to. Of course, you'd probably wipe the floor with him too, but he might be one to look into. He would probably definitely go for it.
Yep, I'm just call me the atheist janitor. I'm always wiping the floor with people. So.
All right, well, I think we're going to need to close up here. One thing I wanted to say before we close, one of the reasons I had you on here tonight is because I think it's important for us as atheists to not only be able to defend our views, but also to show people that we're not these horrible, immoral, evil things that people want to think us think that we are. One case in particular, I actually got a message. I'd asked for some feedback on discrimination for atheists, and